My dad was born in Romania before the war in 1930s, and he spent, and his family spent the war in Europe, and he came to Argentina after the war in 1949. From my mom's side, my mom was born in Argentina and met my dad, but my grandparents, from my mom's side, they came from Poland before the war. They came to Argentina in 1928, just the day after they got married. And this is how, well, my dad and my grandparents from Poland ended up in Argentina. Argentina and the United States were the two hubs for Jewish immigration in the 1800s, late 1800s and early 1900s, and before and after the war. So Argentina and New York, that's why the biggest Jewish community in the Americas are the ones in New York and in Buenos Aires or Argentina. The first Jewish community or immigrants arrived in the 1880s and 1890s after a big support from the Baron Hirsch. After all the pogroms in Eastern Europe, he decided to find places where Jewish people, where Jews could emigrate. So Argentina was a very promised land as the United States in those times. And there was a lot to do and to build. So he bought lots of land northeast of Buenos Aires, capital city. And he started bringing all these Jews that were tailors, that were butchers, and were from the shtetls in Europe. And they were giving huge pieces of land, and they needed to start learning and how to work the land and how to grow wheat and cebada, centeno, were all these cereals. So they started working the land and the earth, and they start making the communities in each little village, which were hubs from the big ranch. We have, you know that in Argentina there are big estancias, big ranches, and every area needs a little village as a hub to concentrate the bank, the good trades. So in those little villages, they start building their synagogues, the schools, the social clubs, and this is how also the seed of the AMIA was planted. One of the founders, the AMIA founders, was a guy from these villages, was one of the second generation. First generations were the Europeans, but this was the seed of the AMIA, because after after a couple of years, the kids, and you know how Jews are, always willing to achieve more knowledge and studying. So they started, they had their secondary and degrees, the college degrees, and they started looking for professions like doctors, to become doctors, architects, engineers, lawyers, economists. So a lot of this second and third generation moved to Buenos Aires to go to university. So Buenos Aires had already Jews settled in the city, but this inner migration from the provinces of these young people started a huge and big community in Buenos Aires. So this is how the AMIA was first conceived. The AMIA was born as a social network that started helping the Jews. Here we say it in Spanish, mutual. This is the M of the mutual, Asociación Mutual Israelita Argentina. That is the AMIA. AMIA was so important that nowadays AMIA is part of the Argentinian community, not only in any kind of person, Jew or non-Jew, can go to AMIA and leave their resume and to find maybe a job. This is how they started and what they did, basically, and they still. And it's an icon of the Jewish and the Jewish world, the AMIA. We have SEDAIA, the OSA, Organización Sionista Argentina. We have a lot. The Jewish community grew so much that there are a lot of organizations, but the mother of all of them, and the first, is the AMIA. A truck parked next to the building, exploding, building collapsed. So you have to imagine how the amount of explosives you need to have in one van to destroy a whole building down, not just the windows or a part of it, the building. So it was a morning. This story is very touchy because my uncle, which is living in Israel now, he went to the Israeli embassy in the morning, and 15 or 10 minutes earlier, he had left the embassy. And he was walking, and maybe 10 or 15 blocks away, the bombing occurred in the morning. So it's a miracle that he saved his life. I was at home before going to work, and I listened to the bombing. I listened to a very big explosion, and I said, oh, what happened? And 10 minutes later, I turned on the TV, and this is what happened. Just think of the neighborhood of Recoleta when the bombing, the Israeli embassy bombing occurred, like 10 blocks surrounding the buildings suffered damages. There's a tower 3 blocks away from the embassy, and all the glasses were broken. The embassy was the prelude. We had a second bombing 2 years later. It was also in the morning, and I was at my apartment, getting ready to get out as well. Same thing, because both attacks were in the morning, so early in the morning. But not that early, because these people wanted everybody to get to their places to work. So this was this was worst. AMIA was 9:53 in the morning. And yeah, that day, I was a later day for me to go out. So I was also getting ready on a bus from my place to AMIA, maybe 15 minutes on a bus, 15, 20 minutes. Walking distance, maybe 45 minutes from my place. So this is just to point you and measure the distance and how I heard the huge explosion in my flat. The window glasses just shaked. So I said, oh, now perhaps I could relate. And I said, wow, there's another thing here going on. And this was really, really bad because the whole building, 6-story building, the embassy was just 1, 2. This was a 6-story building, thick, very strong, and collapsed. I think that every Jew in Buenos Aires knows someone who had someone lost in the bombing. So I knew those guys. I was completely shocked to find that 2 brothers, Pablo and Fabian, they were in the AMIA that morning to organize and to deal with their grandfather's burial in one of the Jewish cemeteries. So they were there both, just making the arrangements to the burial that their grandfather had just passed away, and they were there in the burial department of AMIA when the bombing, and they both passed away. So I can't think I remember their mother, because when we were kids, we were together and we played. She had lost her father and their 2 kids the next day. Terrible. It was not just a small synagogue in a neighborhood. It was the AMIA. And the meaning of AMIA and what AMIA means for Argentina is beyond the Jewish community. And after that bombing, the second, the Jewish life here changed a little bit, because if you just walk around Buenos Aires and you see a barricade between the border of the sidewalk and the car and the street, you know that there's a Jewish place there.
Hoy el atentado o mejor dicho, la causa del atentado a la AMIA tiene hojas y hojas de investigaciones que podrían ser 3 o 4 edificios. Cuestión es que ahora se abre otro capítulo. Una cosa es el atentado a la AMIA y otra cosa son todos los encubridores, los que encubrieron por primera vez. Y el pedido de justicia es constante. Por ejemplo, cuento también de la Unión de Jóvenes Judíos Argentinos, participamos de un acto con otras juventudes de la comunidad judía, en el cual, junto a familiares de memoria activa, hicimos un reclamo a la sociedad y también a la comunidad judía en estos 26 años del atentado a la AMIA.
July 18, 2012. Exactly 18 years after the terrorist attack in Argentina, a bus carrying Israeli tourists in Burgas, Bulgaria exploded. 5 Israelis and the Bulgarian bus driver were killed and 32 others were injured. These attacks have more in common than the date of their bloody anniversary. These murders, fueled by anti-Semitic hatred, were perpetrated by the same force of evil, Hezbollah, Iranian-backed terrorist group. The European Union considers Hezbollah's military wing a terrorist organization, while allowing its political wing to operate within the Union. So long as this distinction exists and allows Hezbollah to operate in Europe, we can never be safe.